My name is Mark, and I'm about to tell you a story that completely shattered my world and then rebuilt it in the most unexpected way. For 12 years, I thought I knew everything about my wife Ursula. I was a mechanic at Detroit's largest auto repair shop, working with my hands fixing things that were broken. Little did I know that my own life was about to break in ways I never imagined, and the repair job would take a very different form than anything I'd ever worked on. It all started on a rainy Tuesday evening 3 months ago. I remember the date exactly, October 15th, because it was the day everything I thought I knew about my life came crashing down. I had just finished a particularly grueling shift trying to diagnose a transmission problem on a 2018 Ford Explorer that had been giving our shop trouble for weeks. My hands were still dirty with grease when I walked through the front door of our modest 2-story house in the suburbs of Detroit. Ursula ran a small but successful beauty salon called Urban Elegance in our neighborhood. She had built it from nothing over 8 years, and I was proud of her entrepreneurial spirit. She often worked late, dealing with clients who could only come after their own work hours, so I was used to coming home to an empty house. But that evening was different. Her phone was lying on the kitchen counter, screen facing up. This was unusual because Ursula was practically attached to that device. It was her lifeline to her business, her clients, her whole professional world. She never left it behind, not even when she went to the bathroom. Seeing it there, forgotten, sent a small chill down my spine, though I couldn't explain why at the time. I was making myself a sandwich when the phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number with a local area code. Thinking it might be one of her clients with an emergency, maybe someone needed to reschedule an appointment, I decided to answer it. "Hello, Ursula's phone," I said, trying to sound professional. There was a pause on the other end, and then I heard a man's voice, warm and intimate in a way that made my stomach drop. "Hey beautiful, I was just thinking about you. Are we still on for tonight? I found this amazing little restaurant I want to take you to." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The tone, the familiarity, the casual intimacy. This wasn't a business call. This wasn't even a friend. This was someone who clearly had a very different relationship with my wife than I could have ever imagined. I stood there, frozen, holding the phone to my ear. My mouth went completely dry, and for a moment I couldn't speak. The silence stretched on, and I could hear the man on the other end starting to realize something was wrong. "Ursula? Are you there? You sound different." I finally found my voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "This isn't Ursula." The line went dead immediately. But the real shock was still waiting for me. I set the phone back down on the counter with shaking hands. My mind was racing, trying to process what I had just heard. Maybe it was a wrong number. Maybe it was some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent explanation for why some man was calling my wife beautiful and making dinner plans with her. But deep down, in that place where we keep the truths we don't want to acknowledge, I knew better. When Ursula came home 2 hours later, she was carrying takeout bags from our favorite Thai restaurant and wearing the bright smile I had fallen in love with all those years ago. She kissed me on the cheek, the same casual greeting she had given me thousands of times before, but tonight it felt different. Tonight it felt like a lie. "Sorry I'm late, honey," she said, unpacking the food. Mrs. Henderson needed a last-minute color touch-up for her daughter's wedding tomorrow. You know how these brides' mothers get. I nodded and made appropriate responses, but I was studying her face, looking for signs of deception. She seemed perfectly normal, chatting about her day, complaining about a difficult client, asking me about the transmission problem I had been working on. If she was lying, she was remarkably good at it. "Oh, I forgot my phone again," she said suddenly, picking it up from the counter. "I'm so scattered lately. Good thing no one called, right?" I looked directly into her eyes when I answered. "Actually, someone did call. Wrong number, I think. Looking for someone named Ursula." I watched her face carefully, but she didn't even blink. "Weird," she said, checking her missed calls. "I don't see anything here. Must have been a really wrong number." That's when I knew for certain. The call had come through, but somehow it wasn't showing up in her call log. Which meant she had already deleted it, or she had some other phone, or there was something technical going on that I didn't understand. Whatever the explanation, her casual dismissal of it told me everything I needed to know. The next few weeks were the strangest of my life. I went through the motions of being a normal husband while internally I was falling apart. I didn't confront her immediately because I needed to understand what I was dealing with. Was this a recent thing? Had it been going on for months? Years? Was I losing my mind, or was my 12-year marriage actually a complete lie? I started paying attention to details I had previously ignored. How often she worked late. How she guarded her phone. How she had started taking longer showers and spending more time on her appearance in the mornings. How she had become more distant during our conversations, as if part of her mind was always somewhere else. But the real shock was still waiting for me. 3 weeks after that phone call, I decided I needed concrete evidence. Not because I was planning to hire a lawyer or cause a scene, but because I needed to know the truth for my own sanity. The not knowing was eating me alive. I took a personal day from work and followed her. It felt ridiculous and degrading, like something out of a bad movie, but I had to know. She left the house at her usual time, 8:30 a.m., telling me she had back-to-back appointments all day and would probably work late again. Instead of going to her salon, she drove to a coffee shop on the other side of town. I parked across the street and waited. At 9:15, a silver BMW pulled up and a man got out. He was tall, probably in his early 40s, with dark hair and the kind of confident posture that comes from success. He was wearing an expensive-looking suit and carried himself like someone who was used to being in charge. When they met at the entrance of the coffee shop, they embraced. Not a friendly hug, not a business greeting, but the kind of embrace reserved for lovers. Long, intimate, familiar. The kind of embrace I hadn't received from my own wife in months. I sat in my car for 2 hours, watching them through the window of that coffee shop. They were clearly comfortable with each other, laughing, holding hands across the table, looking into each other's eyes with the intensity of people who were completely absorbed in one another. At one point, he reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear in such a tender gesture that I had to look away. When they finally left, they kissed goodbye in the parking lot. A long, passionate kiss that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Then she got in her car and drove to her salon, while he got in his BMW and headed in the opposite direction. I followed him. The silver BMW led me to a construction company about 20 minutes away from the coffee shop. The sign out front read, Thompson Construction Commercial and Residential Development. I watched the man, who I now assumed was Mr. Thompson, park in a spot marked Owner, and walk into the building with the confident stride of someone who belonged there. I sat in my car for a few more minutes trying to process what I had learned. My wife was having an affair with a successful businessman. Someone who could probably give her things I never could, expensive dinners, luxury vacations, a lifestyle that was far beyond what a mechanic's salary could provide. Part of me wanted to march into that building and confront him right then and there. But another part of me, the part that was still hoping against hope that there was some explanation I wasn't seeing, held me back. Instead, I went home and did something I never thought I would do. I searched through Ursula's things. In her jewelry box, hidden behind a false back that I only found by accident, I discovered a collection of items that told the story of a relationship I knew nothing about. Restaurant receipts from places we had never been together. The key to a hotel room. A small gift box containing a pair of expensive earrings that I had never seen her wear. And most devastating of all, a series of photographs. They were pictures of Ursula and this man, who I learned from a business card tucked behind one of the photos was named Kevin Thompson, taken over what appeared to be several months. Beach vacations, fancy restaurants, weekend getaways to places I recognized but had never visited with my wife. In every picture they looked happy, relaxed, completely comfortable with each other. They looked like a couple. Among the photographs was one that made my blood run cold. It was taken at what looked like a company picnic or some kind of outdoor business event. Kevin was standing with his arm around Ursula, both of them smiling at the camera. But it wasn't their pose that shocked me, it was what I could see in the background. There was a banner hanging behind them that read, Thompson Construction Annual Family Day. And scattered throughout the background were other couples, other families, all of whom appeared to know and be comfortable with Ursula and Kevin as a couple. This wasn't just an affair. This was a whole other life. Ursula wasn't just cheating on me, she was living as Kevin's girlfriend in his professional and social world. These people thought she was his partner. They had been introduced to her, had conversations with her, probably considered her part of Kevin's life. The depth of the deception was staggering. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a brief fling. This was a carefully constructed double life that had been going on for months, possibly longer. I put everything back exactly as I had found it and spent the rest of the day sitting in my living room, staring at the walls, trying to figure out what to do with this information. That evening, when Ursula came home with another excuse about working late, I watched her with new eyes. How had she managed to keep this secret? How had she looked me in the eye every day, kissed me goodbye every morning, shared a bed with me every night, all while maintaining an entire relationship with another man? The next day, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of confronting Ursula, instead of hiring a lawyer, instead of doing any of the things that would have been the obvious next steps, I decided to contact Kevin Thompson directly. I wasn't sure what I hoped to accomplish. Maybe I wanted to understand what kind of man would get involved with a married woman. Maybe I wanted to see if he even knew she was married. Maybe I just wanted to look him in the eye and try to understand what he had that I didn't. I called Thompson Construction and asked to speak with Kevin. When his secretary asked what it was regarding, I told her it was a personal matter. A few minutes later, his voice came on the line. "This is Kevin Thompson." "Mr. Thompson," I said, surprised by how calm my own voice sounded. "My name is Marc. I think we need to talk about Ursula." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry, who is this?" "I'm Ursula's husband." The silence that followed was so complete I thought the line had gone dead. "Her husband?" he finally said, and I could hear the shock in his voice. "But she told me she was divorced." And there it was. The piece of the puzzle I hadn't expected. Kevin Thompson didn't know he was having an affair with a married woman. In his mind, he was dating a single woman named Ursula who had been previously married but was now free to start a new relationship. "Mr. Thompson," I said carefully, "I think we both need to sit down and have a conversation. Are you available to meet today?" 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Kevin Thompson in a quiet corner booth of a diner halfway between our homes. Up close, he was even more impressive than he had appeared from a distance. Tall, well-built, with intelligent eyes and an air of confidence that came from success in business. I could see why Ursula had been attracted to him. But what surprised me was how genuinely shocked and upset he seemed to be learning about me. "She told me she had been married," he said, running his hands through his hair. "But she said the divorce was finalized 2 years ago. She said her ex-husband had moved to another state and they had no contact. We live together," I told him. "We share a bed. We have joint bank accounts. We file taxes together. There's no divorce, Kevin. There's never been any talk of divorce." He stared at me across the table, and I could see him processing this information, trying to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the reality I was presenting him. "How long have you been seeing her?" I asked. 8 months, he said quietly. "We met when she came to get an estimate for some renovation work on her salon. We started talking and she seemed amazing. Smart, funny, beautiful. She said she was ready to start dating again after her divorce." 8 months, I repeated. For 8 months, my wife had been living a double life, maintaining a serious relationship with this man while continuing to be married to me. "I need to show you something," Kevin said, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through his photos and then handed it to me. What I saw on that screen made my stomach drop all over again. There were dozens of pictures of Kevin and Ursula together. Formal events, casual dinners, weekend trips. In many of them she was wearing clothes I had never seen before. Expensive dresses, jewelry that wasn't in her collection at home. She looked different in these photos, more glamorous, more confident, like a different version of herself. "She's been staying at my place on weekends," Kevin said softly. "She said her apartment was too small and she was looking for a new place. I was actually going to ask her to move in with me permanently." The room seemed to spin around me. Weekends. All those weekends when she had told me she was having girls' nights out, or visiting her sister in Grand Rapids, or attending beauty industry conferences. She had been living with another man. "Kevin," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need you to understand something. Everything she told you about her past, about being divorced, about being single, none of it is true. But I also need you to know that I don't think you're the villain in this story." He looked at me with surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you fell for the same woman I fell for 12 years ago. She's charming, she's beautiful, she's convincing. The difference is that you thought she was available and I thought she was faithful. We were both wrong, but for different reasons. We sat in that diner for 3 hours, comparing notes about the woman we had both loved. The stories Kevin told me about Ursula painted a picture of someone I barely recognized. She was adventurous with him, spontaneous, willing to try new things. She talked about traveling the world, starting over in a new city, building a different kind of life. The woman he described sounded like someone who felt trapped in her current situation and was using their relationship as an escape fantasy. But instead of being honest about her circumstances, she had constructed an elaborate lie that allowed her to live 2 completely different lives. "There's something else," Kevin said as we were preparing to leave the diner. "Something I think you should know." He pulled out a small velvet box and set it on the table between us. "I was going to propose to her next week. I had it all planned out. Dinner at the restaurant where we had our first date, then a walk along the waterfront. I thought we were building a future together." I stared at that engagement ring box, and for the first time since this whole nightmare had begun, I felt genuinely sorry for someone other than myself. Kevin had been planning to propose to a woman who was already married. He had been making plans for a future with someone who was living a complete lie. She would have said yes, I told him, though I'm not sure why. Maybe because it seemed true, or maybe because he looked like he needed to hear it. But she would have been saying yes to Kevin's girlfriend, not to Ursula the married woman, he replied. I don't even know which one is the real person anymore. That question haunted me for the rest of the day. Which version of Ursula was real? The wife who had shared my bed for 12 years, or the girlfriend who had been planning a new life with Kevin? Had our entire marriage been a lie, or was her relationship with Kevin the fantasy? I went home that evening knowing that I had to confront her, but I still wasn't sure how. Kevin and I had exchanged phone numbers and agreed to think about how we wanted to handle the situation. Neither of us wanted to cause unnecessary drama, but we both needed resolution. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. When I got home, Ursula was in the living room pacing back and forth with her phone pressed to her ear. She was speaking in low, urgent tones, and when she saw me come in, she quickly ended the call. Who was that? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew. Just work stuff, she said, but her voice was strained and she wouldn't meet my eyes. Ursula, I said, sitting down on the couch, we need to talk. Something in my tone must have warned her that this wasn't going to be a normal conversation. She sat down across from me, perched on the edge of the chair like she was ready to run. I met with Kevin Thompson today, I said simply. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, slowly, she put her head in her hands. How long have you known? She whispered. About Kevin? A few weeks. About you cheating? 3 months since that phone call. She looked up at me then and I saw tears in her eyes, but also something else. Relief, maybe. The exhaustion that comes from carrying a secret that's too heavy to bear. I never meant for this to happen, she said. But it did happen. For 8 months it's been happening. 8 months of lies, Ursula. 8 months of living with me while planning a future with him. It's not that simple, she said, and for the first time, there was a defensive edge to her voice. Then explain it to me. Make me understand how you managed to look me in the eye every single day while you were building a relationship with another man. What came out in the hours that followed was not the simple story of infidelity I had expected. It was more complicated, more heartbreaking, and more revealing than I could have imagined. Ursula told me that she had felt trapped in our marriage for years. Not because I was a bad husband, but because she felt like she had never had the chance to figure out who she really was. We had gotten married young, and she had gone straight from living with her parents to living with me. She loved me, she said, but she felt like she had never had the opportunity to explore her own identity, her own dreams, her own possibilities. When I met Kevin, she said, it wasn't about sex or romance, at least not at first. It was about the way he saw me. He saw someone confident and adventurous and capable of anything. When I was with him, I felt like a different person. A person I wanted to be. So you decided to become that person by lying to both of us? I didn't plan it, she insisted. When he asked about my personal life, I panicked. I didn't want to tell him I was married because I thought he wouldn't be interested. So I told him I was divorced. And then one lie led to another, and before I knew it, I was living 2 completely different lives. For 8 months, Ursula. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was 8 months of deliberate deception. She nodded, crying now. I know how awful it sounds. But I didn't know how to stop it. I loved both of you in different ways. You represented security and comfort in the life I had built. Kevin represented possibility and adventure and the life I thought I wanted. I couldn't choose, so I tried to have both. There's something else you need to know, she said, wiping her eyes. Kevin proposed to me yesterday. My heart stopped. What? He took me to dinner and asked me to marry him. He had a ring and everything. He said he wanted to spend his life with me. And what did you tell him? I told him I needed time to think about it. But Marc, I was going to say yes. I was going to divorce you and marry him. The finality of those words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just an affair that might blow over. This was the end of our marriage, planned and deliberate. When? I asked. I was going to tell you next week. I had it all worked out. I was going to ask for a divorce, tell you I had fallen out of love, let you think it was about us growing apart. I didn't want you to know about Kevin because I didn't want to hurt you any more than necessary. That's interesting, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. Because Kevin doesn't know you said yes. He thinks you need to think about it. She looked confused. What do you mean? I mean that while you were planning to divorce me and marry him, he was showing me the engagement ring and wondering if you really loved him. He had no idea you had already made your decision. You told him about us? I told him the truth, Ursula. something that seems to be in short supply around here. What happened next was something I never could have predicted. Over the following weeks, Kevin and I began talking regularly. At first, it was just about practical matters, how to handle the situation with Ursula, whether to give her a chance to explain herself, what we both wanted moving forward. But gradually, our conversations became more personal. We talked about our relationships with Ursula, about the different sides of her we had each known. We compared notes about her likes and dislikes, her dreams and fears, her habits and quirks. What we discovered was that we had both been in love with the same woman, but we had each only known half of her. The Ursula I knew was domestic, practical, focused on building a stable life. The Ursula Kevin knew was spontaneous, ambitious, eager to take risks and try new things. Neither version was more real than the other, they were both authentic parts of who she was. But she had compartmentalized her personality so completely that neither of us had ever seen the whole person. I think that's why she couldn't choose, Kevin said during one of our long phone conversations. She wasn't choosing between two men. She was choosing between two versions of herself. This insight didn't make what she had done right, but it helped me understand it in a way that made it less personal. She hadn't rejected me for Kevin, and she hadn't been planning to reject Kevin for me. She had been trying to be two different people, and eventually, that became impossible to sustain. 3 weeks after our confrontation, Ursula moved out of our house. She didn't move in with Kevin. He had made it clear that he needed time to process everything that had happened. Instead, she rented a small apartment across town and began the difficult process of figuring out who she was when she wasn't trying to be two different people for two different men. Kevin and I continued to talk, and gradually, our conversations evolved from being about Ursula to being about our own lives, our work, our interests. I discovered that despite our different backgrounds, we had a lot in common. We both loved old movies, we both enjoyed working with our hands, he in construction, me in auto repair. We both had complicated relationships with our families. One evening, about a month after Ursula had moved out, Kevin called me with an unusual request. "I know this might sound weird," he said, "but would you want to grab a beer sometime? Not to talk about Ursula, just, I don't know, I feel like we've gotten to know each other through this whole mess, and I'd like to meet properly." I agreed, and that Friday evening found us sitting in a sports bar, drinking beer and watching a Tigers game. It was surprisingly comfortable. Kevin was easy to talk to, funny, and genuinely interested in hearing about my work and my life. "You know," he continued, "maybe your experience with Ursula taught you something valuable about relationships. Not just the negative stuff about being careful, but also about what you really need from a partner." "What do you mean?" "I mean that you now know what it feels like to be with someone who isn't completely honest with you. So when you meet someone who is genuinely honest, you'll recognize it. You'll appreciate it in a way that most people take for granted." His words stuck with me, and I started approaching dating with a different mindset. Instead of looking for red flags, I started looking for green flags, signs that someone was trustworthy, consistent, and authentic. 3 months later, I met Jennifer. She was a nurse at the hospital where I had taken my elderly neighbor after he had fallen and broken his hip. We struck up a conversation in the waiting room, and I found myself genuinely enjoying talking to her. She was different from Ursula in almost every way: shorter, blonde instead of brunette, more reserved in her personality but also somehow more direct in her communication. When I asked her out for coffee, she said yes, but she also said something that caught me off guard. I should probably mention that I'm recently divorced. The papers were finalized 6 months ago. I'm still figuring out how to navigate dating again, so if you're looking for someone who has it all figured out, I'm probably not your girl. Her honesty was refreshing. After years of wondering what Ursula was really thinking, it was a relief to be with someone who said exactly what was on her mind. Our first few dates were careful, tentative. We both carried scars from our previous relationships. Hers from a marriage that had ended because of fundamental incompatibilities, mine from a marriage that had ended because of deception. But gradually we began to trust each other. Jennifer knew about my situation with Ursula and Kevin from early on. I had decided that Kevin was right about honesty being the best policy, so I told her the whole story on our third date. I expected her to be shocked or uncomfortable, but instead she was fascinated. "So you and Kevin are genuinely close friends now?" she asked. "Best friends, actually. I know it sounds crazy, but he's probably the person I'm closest to in the world right now." "It doesn't sound crazy at all. It sounds like you both found something positive in a really terrible situation. You're not weirded out by it?" "Why would I be? You turned what could have been a destructive experience into something that enriched your life. That tells me a lot about your character." 6 months into my relationship with Jennifer, Kevin asked me to be his best man at his wedding to Sarah. I was honored, but also nervous about how Jennifer would feel about the whole situation. Having your boyfriend stand up as best man for the guy who used to sleep with his ex-wife seemed like it might be awkward for everyone involved. Are you kidding? Jennifer said when I told her about Kevin's request. Of course you have to do it. This is a huge honor and it shows how much your friendship means to him. The wedding was beautiful and my best man speech was one of the highlights of my life. I talked about how Kevin and I had met under the worst possible circumstances and somehow found a brotherhood that neither of us had expected. I talked about how our friendship had taught me that sometimes the most meaningful relationships come from the most unlikely places. Kevin, I said, raising my glass for the toast, you've shown me that it's possible to find something beautiful even in the middle of heartbreak. You've been my friend, my brother, and my partner in figuring out how to rebuild our lives. Sarah, you're getting one of the best men I've ever known, and Kevin, you're getting a woman who sees and appreciates exactly who you are. Here's to both of you, and to the kind of love that's built on truth, honesty, and genuine friendship. There wasn't a dry eye in the house, including mine. A year later, it was my turn to get married. Jennifer and I had moved in together 6 months earlier, and when I proposed to her on the anniversary of the day we met, she said yes immediately. I love you, Mark, she said, tears in her eyes. But more than that, I trust you completely. And I know you trust me. That's not something I take for granted. Kevin was my best man, of course. In his speech at our reception, he told the story of our friendship from his perspective, talking about how I had taught him the difference between love built on fantasy and love built on reality. Mark, he said, you could have hated me. You had every right to hate me. Instead, you became my friend and showed me what real character looks like. Jennifer, you're marrying a man who knows how to forgive, how to find hope in dark places, and how to build something beautiful out of something broken. Ursula sent a card. She didn't attend the wedding, none of us thought that would be appropriate, but she sent a handwritten note saying she was happy for me and that she hoped Jennifer and I would have the kind of marriage that was built on complete honesty and mutual respect. She seems to have learned something from the experience too, Jennifer said when I showed her the card. I hope so. I really do hope she's finding her way to happiness. And I meant it. Whatever anger I had felt toward Ursula had long since faded into something closer to sadness for the choices she had made and hope that she was learning to make better ones. This story taught me a lot. I had learned that love wasn't just about passion or romance, it was about choosing to show up for someone every day, especially when it was difficult. I had learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing, it was about refusing to let someone else's choices define your future. Most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the people who hurt you the most can inadvertently lead you to the people who will love you the best. Kevin had taught me that friendship could be stronger than romantic love, that loyalty could grow from the most unlikely circumstances. Jennifer had taught me that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt even stronger than before. Even Ursula, in her way, had taught me valuable lessons about the difference between the person you think you love and the person who actually loves you back. And now, I had finally arrived at a life that was exactly what it appeared to be. Honest, stable, and built on love that was chosen daily rather than demanded or assumed. It was, I thought, the perfect ending to the most imperfect beginning. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.